What's up, guys? This is Z-House from Gun Gamers, and today I'm coming at you with a bit of a conversation starter video. We haven't done one of these in a little while, so I figured it was high past time that we hit that up. Today's conversation starter, today's little mini discussion video is, what is MilSim? What is military simulation as it pertains to Airsoft? Obviously, there are other forms of MilSim out there, particularly in the video game realm. Things like Arma 3 are used for video game MilSim. But I'm talking about, in Airsoft context, what exactly is MilSim? So we're going to discuss that. I've got some thoughts, some experiences, some opinions, and I'm looking for your thoughts, experiences, and opinions as well in the comments. If you think I hit the nail on the head, if you think I'm an idiot, if you want to give me your opinion on this Port Charlotte 10-year heavily peated Islay Scotch whiskey, my opinion is that's fantastic. So now that my whiskey opinion is out of the way, let's get to my dumb Airsoft opinion. So MilSim obviously is a bit of a shorthand term for military simulation. And military simulation refers to the act of taking a game and making it into more of a true-to-life scenario in regard to making it a simulation of a military operation. So that's the most simple, raw definition I can possibly give without delving into opinion of what in current Airsoft makes an Airsoft game MilSim. It is an Airsoft game that attempts to some degree or another to create the simulated atmosphere of a military operation. That really is as simple as it gets. What it is not is a play style, and I apologize for any confusion that the Speed Sim series on this channel may have created with that, because, I think we referred to, more MilSim play style at different points, but MilSim is not a play style, it is an event format. That is a key distinction that I think needs to be made. You're not a MilSim player because you wear gear. You are a MilSim player because you go to MilSim games. That's the little bit of a distinction. That's a little bit of a point of contention with some people. Some people don't seem to understand that, MilSim is the event. It's not the team, it's not the gear, it's the event. The event might call for different gear and different teams and things like that, but then that gets into the degree of MilSim. And that, I think, is actually where a lot of this debate comes from, because you'll get some people, and I love Josh and I love MilSim West, but his tagline has become, basically MilSim West is the only MilSim. And I think by the metric he uses to measure MilSim, that is definitely accurate. I would love to actually have this conversation with Josh on the podcast sometime. I'll try to figure that out and make that happen. But I think his metric is the most hardcore metric we currently have to apply to Airsoft. Because if you actually look in the grand scheme of things, if you want an even more hardcore MilSim experience, there is a lot of room to go upward. That's when you start getting into, maybe vehicle-mounted operations, when you start getting into dealing with civilians and the local populace, which granted the insurgency events have to a very real degree. That's when you start getting into, rules of engagement and stuff like that. That's another level that MilSim can go to. So I think right now what we have are the levels and the scales. We don't have a black and white definition of what is and isn't MilSim necessarily right now. Instead, I think what we have is more casual to more hardcore degrees of MilSim. I think that's a very fair standard. But to fall anywhere on that spectrum from casual to hardcore MilSim, I think there are some bare minimum requirements that need to be met in order for your event to call itself a MilSim. Whether you, as an event promoter, market your events as MilSim or not, I think these are the requirements that should be met before players can really say they had a MilSim experience. And that is, bare minimum, uniform requirements of the factions, an instituted chain of command, some form of accountability to that chain of command, and some form of role system that allows players to make use of different weapon systems and different classes, basically, is what it comes down to, and have different roles within their squad. That way you have the simulation of every tool has its purpose, you have the simulation of every squad falls into place somewhere within the chain of command, And the chain of command has the ability to keep track of squads. And obviously with the uniform requirements, that just helps with IFF and helps with the basic design of an event. If you don't think we should have uniform requirements for any games, I would be very interested in watching you run that from a distance where I can eat popcorn and hear all the complaints. So that is my bare minimum for what your event should provide or have instituted, or at least, at the very least, have intended. That is my absolute bare minimum for what for when an event can be called MilSim. Bare minimum. Then you get into, okay, well, how long does the game go on? What are the ammo limitations? What are the rules of engagement? Is there a civilian population? Are you in the field all 40 hours? Do you have to bivouac? Can you go back to your car? All of those different requirements, to me, don't necessarily determine whether or not something is MilSim. Those determine to me what level of MilSim something is, whether it's a more casual event or a more hardcore event. And that is where you get into where the lines start to blur, because then you've got event promoters like Third Coast and AMS where the events don't continue all the way through the entire weekend, but they might have, mission structure. They might have different levels of accountability for the chain of command. They've got all the different roles. They've got these other things that make them this MilSim experience, but not quite as intense and hardcore a MilSim experience as MilSim West, which is by design. You should, as a market, hope that you have a diversity of events being offered to players, because as many people as I speak to who say MilSim West is the coolest thing ever, I speak to equally as many people who say, yeah, that's great, but I personally am not into that. I'd rather be able to shower at the end of the day. I don't like the idea of not sleeping or sleeping knowing that I could be attacked at any minute, and that's totally fine. There should be a diversity of events. But where I think you get into the more hardcore differentiation is definitely when you start seeing 40 hours, sleep in the field, no breaks. That is right now in the United States peak hardcore. Now, of course, all of this that I've said doesn't even take into account, okay, Eric, well, you said MilSim wasn't about the gear, but what are the different levels of that? And that is where you really run into that can of worms where people want to discuss, are you a MilSim player if your kit isn't an impression? Should you be using an impression at every MilSim event? And all this different stuff. And this is where I think the game kind of compromises itself a bit, because it is still a game. I don't think you'll see too many events that will require accurate reenactment loadouts, because then I think you step out of being a MilSim and you step into being a reenactment. And a one-to-one reenactment is meant to simulate pretty much to as exact as possible how things were done, how the uniforms looked, what the rations were like. There's a lot of the reenactment community gets down to eating, reproduction C rations for World War II events, which is great and that's super cool. But that's where I think you step above MilSim into reenactment. MilSim is that step below reenactment, I think, where you are still gamifying it. It's a lot less about the exacts and the particulars of truly reenacting a military conflict, and it's a lot more about simulating a military conflict in the context of a much more gamified system. That said, there is definitely a lot of room for that next level of hardcore MilSim to incorporate doing your impressions and having your accurate gear, maybe using that reenactment level stuff, but you're not going to get that same level of reenactment experience unless the event promoters truly step into, you have to have reenactment gear to come, reenactment ready gear to come to this event. Otherwise, you're going to have what you have at every Airsoft event, where you've got your groups of people who show up and they've got their accurate, impression kits. You've got Grom, TF Keg is something that we're working on here at Gun Gamers, Rushing Russians, all those different guys, Dev Team 6, all those different guys who create these loadouts from all these different forces, and they go out and they use those at Airsoft. That is that level where the player is ultimately more responsible for how hardcore their MilSim experience is than the event promoter, though. And That's largely because event promoters, in order to sell enough tickets to keep the doors open and to put on the types and sizes of event at the locations that we like to have them, you can't really step fully into reenactment until the market reaches a level where everyone wants to do the reenactment. And I think that that's increasing. I think we're seeing a lot more people getting a lot more involved in different impression groups. I mean, shit, this TF Keg thing that Corey started is my first real impression kit that I've been serious about. And I think that you'll see that evolution as time progresses. I think you will see more events that step closer and closer to that reenactment line, which, like I said, I still consider a bit of a step above MilSim, because then reenactments, might be more scripted, they might be less gamey, but I haven't really done a reenactment, so if I'm speaking out of turn, feel free to correct me in the comments. Tell me what a big dumb idiot I am. But then, like I said, that's the upper end of the MilSim spectrum, so to speak. Whereas you get the lower end where it's more about, okay, well, what works? And that, I think, comes down to, do you want that true hardcore experience of reenacting every detail of being in a military unit? Or do you want that more casual experience where you're reenacting, okay, we've got squads, we've got a chain of command, we've got a command structure that we're accountable to, there's different roles within the squad, but other than that, we're kind of allowed to do what we want. And to a certain degree, from what I understand, speaking with people who've been attached to these groups, that is almost more of a simulation of some special forces units than a rigid, here's what you're gonna wear all the time, now wear it. So, maybe there's an argument to be made that that's pretty hardcore in and of itself. But that said, I doubt too many of those special forces dudes are running around wherever they're running around wearing jeans and TMC gear and a dye mask. So it's, give and take here and there. But that, like I said, is just another level of, do I think you have to have an impression kit to be MilSim? Not necessarily. But I do think that it's a more casual type of kit when it's not an impression kit, which, hey, I like my hipster garbage. I wear my casual hipster garbage. I know it's casual hipster garbage. I don't care. So I'm not speaking down to anybody about this, but you are definitely making sacrifices on the authenticity and the MilSim aspect in order to lean heavier into the gamey aspect of, this is a game, I want to wear what's effective for me and what I like, and I don't want to have to make sacrifices to achieve a certain aesthetic. So I've been rambling for quite a while, and what's my point, I guess? I guess my point is that, in a way, MilSim is kind of what you want out of it. And that's what I like about, MilSim and Airsoft in general, is that there are different levels and different tiers, and even within the different levels of event, there's different levels of participation in that event. You go to MilSim West and you get that super hardcore experience in terms of the event format, but then you can step even further toward the reenactment level when you do an impression group at MilSim West. Or if you're not into that, if you want to wear what you want to wear and you don't want to not have access to a shower at the end of the day, go to AMS, go to Third Coast, any of those type of event promoters, and have your continuous gameplay during the day, have your squads and your roles and all that different type of thing, and then be able to wear more of what you want, not have to worry about sustainment gear, just dress for the rules of the event, and then you're good to go. You're able to do any number of things, but you still get that baseline level of MilSim experience with the chain of command, the squad role, the uniforms, that type of thing. That I think is the bare minimum to even be a casual MilSim experience. And again, not talking down to anybody, I like Desert Fox events, for God's sake. Those are not MilSim. Those are not advertised as MilSim. So I would put those in terms of simulation even below AMS or something like that. That said, is that a problem? No, because diversity of market means diversity of player, means more people play, and means that I have more people to go shoot at whatever event I'm going to. So I guess that's my message at the end of this video is there's something out there for everybody. What MilSim should strive to be as a bare minimum, I still think, is a very fair metric. I don't think you can call your event MilSim if you don't hit those main markers. But anything over that, I think, is just different levels of MilSim, different types of MilSim. And I think that the further and further we start pushing into even reenactment territory, that's when you start seeing some really weird and wild and interesting stuff happening. So I'm looking forward to what the future of MilSim brings us. Anyway, I hope that this made sense. If it didn't, leave it in the comments, yell at me, tell me I'm an idiot, tell me my choice in whiskey is bad, tell me my choice in music is bad, call me ugly, call me Seth Rogen's brother, but whatever you want to do, praise Judy, play BB Wars when we get the chance, when we can get back out there. It's been difficult to be excited about Airsoft lately. I don't know if you can tell from the way content has been going on this channel, but I promise we'll be back out on the field just as soon as things calm down and we are legally, safely, and responsibly able to go back. So thank you very much. This has been eHouse from Gun Gamers, and I will catch you all in the next video. Cheers.
Thank you for watching this video from Gun Gamers. We hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. Check the description below if you'd like to buy a t-shirt or a patch, and use the coupon code JUDY10 for 10% off of your next order at Amped Airsoft. Thank you again for watching, and praise Judy.